Hello guys. Today we're going to continue with my whole Anatomy of series, where we're taking a look at a specific processors and we kind of try to build a computer around that specific processor or operating system with what I kind of feel is the best all-around parts, sometimes kind of making the ultimate version of that computer. But today we're going to look at kind of a I don't want to say maligned, but overlooked processor, and that's the 286. So we're taking a further step now. I started off with a Pentium 1 based DOS machine, and we did Anatomy of a 486 and a 386. So we're taking another step back, and we're going to look at the 286 processor, and this machine that I built around the 286. And yeah, I mean, the 286 is overlooked a lot of times by retro gaming, retro PC enthusiasts. I have a couple theories to why that might be. First of all, I don't have stat numbers, how many 286s were made or whatever, but there doesn't seem to be as much nostalgia linked to it. You talk to a lot of people in forums and stuff, and when I was young, my first computer was a 386 or a 486. Even an 8088, but no one says 286, not very often, and I don't know if the sales just weren't as high for 286 machines, or maybe early adapters got 8088s, and then the 286 came out not too long after, and the people that didn't want to jump on the computer bandwagon then maybe still thought they were too expensive or just weren't into it, and then later when the 386 came out, I'm guessing maybe prices where you got more bang for your buck maybe, and people jumped on it and got a family computer around the 386. So I don't know. Maybe there just weren't that as many 286 machines, OEM or whatever, out there. They're not uncommon. They're not rare. So don't think I'm saying that. But I don't seem to come across them as much. My second theory is it has to do specifically with games and speed-sensitive games. And you get this sometimes. I kind of like it because it gives me an excuse to build a computer. It's like, oh, there's a certain game that runs only on a certain CPU speed kind of computer. It's like, oh, that's an excuse for me to spend an afternoon building another computer for like one or two games. But you don't see that a lot with the 286. With the 8088, there is a number of early CGA games that really demand an 8088 running at 4.77 megahertz, with a CGA card or whatever. You can get away with a NEC V20 and a little bit of a speed boost, but a lot of games just demand that 4.77 megahertz 8088 to run properly. And then the other side of things, you have the 386, and there's a couple kind of high-profile games that really need like a low mid-level range 386 processor to run quick. Like Bubble Ghost is a good example. Wing Commander is another big example. And they really demand that kind of processor if you're running on original hardware. And there's other ways around it, but you know what I mean. But you don't see that a lot with the 286. You also get a bigger range of games with the 386. There's just seems like there's more bang for your buck. Like there's nothing a 386 can't do that a 286 does, plus it does more. So there's just not a lot of games that kind of feel, here's the quotes again, just right on a 286. That's not to say it's not a great processor for EGA games, especially like EGA adventure games. It really came out around the time that EGA was taking off. There's a lot of EGA games just play really good on this thing, but like I said, there's just not many games that I know of that just need a 286. So maybe that's why it's not really a go-to processor for people that are into these old games. Now, I don't have like stats in front of me. This is just theories I've kind of come up with why it's not so popular. And probably the biggest reason is just prices and pieces and parts for it. In the wild, going looking thrift stores and swap meets and stuff, I've seen exactly two 286 boards like ever. This machine, and I have another 286 board that I'm probably going to make a computer around just for the hell of it soon. That I'll probably do a video on, but I don't see 286 motherboards a lot, or processors. Again, they're not rare. They're pretty easy to find on eBay, but just kind of finding parts, I just don't see it too often. So And they're more limited than the 386 too, you know, with memory and stuff. So I think a lot of people pass on it. Like, you know, why get a 286 motherboard where you're limited to like 4 megabytes unless you get add-on cards, when you could just get a 386 that could do pretty much the same stuff, but you can have, you know, up to 16 megabytes and you can play a lot more different games, plus that 386 code. And whatnot. So yeah, that's kind of why I don't think the 286 is that popular, but it's still pretty cool in my opinion. It's a little bit different, especially this machine has a little bit rare processor in it that we're going to take a look at. This computer was a Craigslist find. I really just kind of tweaked it and added the video and sound cards and stuff, but I really lucked out on this machine. So I'm going to stop jabbering on and we're going to talk about this specific machine here. It's, you got that classic, you know, mini tower beige 80s case. I love it. You see this a lot on my 386 anatomy of a 386 video. It was a similar case. You see this case has that kind of angle here. My 386 case, it looks the same at first glance, but it's just straight down. My 386 case didn't have this cool green LED display either. But yeah, they have a lot of those cases from the era have this grill styling at the bottom. I really dig it. I really like that. Oh, the switch. Something satisfying about a switch over a button. Although there are 2 buttons here, you know, big buttons, of course, the LED display. Now these are the drives I added. Of course, the 5 1/4 inch. I'm bad with numbers, but yeah, 5 1/4 inch. This is a 1.2 megabyte high density floppy drive. This is, you know, 1.44 megabyte floppy drive, and I have a CD drive as well. You know, you can get away with a 286 with just the floppy drives, but I still recommend a CD drive. They don't have any problem installing a CD drive in these things because they use 16-bit ISA slots, so controller cards are very abundant and cheap. So there's no reason you shouldn't put in a CD drive. And, you know, a lot of games from this era were re-released, CD re-releases, or, you know, it's just easier. It's an added option for convenience. So I definitely recommend you still put in a CD drive. This, I'm using a 4x drive. Obviously I could put in a faster drive, which I might do in the future, because this has trouble reading some CDs, but it does work. It came with it. I just kind of left it in there because, you know, it's a little era specific. You might notice this thing. This is a fake faceplate that looks kind of like a floppy drive. These were sort of popular back in the day. I do not know why. The only thing I can think of is maybe like to trick your friends at a glance, like to make them think that you have like a fancier system. Then you have like, 2 floppy drives. Damn, he's moving up in the world. But no, it's completely, utterly fake. Yeah, see, that's fake. So, yeah, these weren't too uncommon, you know, back in the day. Don't know why. Nothing real exciting on the back. It just looks like a 46 or 386 kind of backward look. We still got the AT keyboard here, and you know, all this. The board itself, though, is a little interesting because there's kind of a little bit of a transition going on between you know, more archaic 8088 sort of boards, and then 386 board, which kind of looks a little bit more like a modern board. So we'll take a look inside this thing. So for the hard drive, I'm using a SCSI drive. It's 2 gigabyte. I like using SCSI drives in these older, you know, 486, 386, and 286. They're a little more expensive and hard to find, but you can make larger partitions with them. And in general, they're a little faster, although they're also a little bit louder sometimes. But yeah, here's the board with the cards removed. I tried to move most of these wires away. As you see, you have 16-bit ISA slots, which is nice because that means on a 286 you're going to have a large array of fairly cheap and easy to find ISA cards of all types available to you, whereas earlier boards only have these 8-bit slots on an 8088. So now we're going to look at what makes this board special, and that's this guy. And what that is is, if I can focus, this is a Harris 286-20. So this is one of the faster 286s, and they're pretty hard to find. Harris made one 286 that was faster. It was a 286-25. This motherboard can't handle it. This is the highest rated chip this board can handle. So this is a later 286 board. But yeah, generally what you're going to find, I believe they made them as slow as 4 megahertz, but generally what you're going to find is 10, 12, 16 megahertz 286s. So the 20 and the 25 megahertz made by Harris, this chip is a pretty rare find, and it's pretty fast. I would say this board with that chip is faster than an equivalent 386 SX chip. So I mean that's usually how it works out. The last generation is usually a little faster than the early generation of the next generation. So you see that with the 386, the AMD 38640, which is generally faster than the very first 46s. You see that with the Pentium. You see that with the Pentium, last Pentium 3s and the earliest Pentium 4s. So that's pretty common. But yeah, I was really happy. It's actually a little faster than I wanted. That's why I'm building another slower 286, because it's a little fast for my liking. But yeah, that's a pretty fast 286, and they're pretty uncommon. Of course, it doesn't have 386 code, so there's some games that just need that. So it's not going to play certain games that need a 386, but it's still, this is pretty fast. It should keep up with early 386 processors. And to go along with that is this guy, which is this is a 287, rated at 20 megahertz. So this is a math coprocessor. Just like the 386 had a math coprocessor, these also have a coprocessor option, which takes care of higher math functions, floating point math routines, and stuff like that. For gaming, it's not really needed. Very few games take advantage of this chip, but this came with the motherboard, and it's also pretty rare. Especially rated at 20 megahertz to match the CPU, so it's pretty cool. Other than that, barrel battery, that's a new one actually. The guy soldered it in before he sold this machine to me. But it's not too dissimilar. What do we got? I think that's a Siemens chipset in there. Yeah. Now for RAM, get this stuff out of the way. There's kind of an option on how to add RAM. You've got these chips. I think they're called dip chips for memory. You can use those. That's more of like how things were on 8088. You had these chips. But this board, you also have the option of using these kind of like more modern RAM that come in these little like SIMs here. The difference is I'm not going to take them out because they're a little bit delicate, and I don't want to risk destroying them. If you want to see what the pin connector looks like on these, check out my blog entry on the 286, the anatomy of a 286. I will link it in the description. I took a picture of one of these removed, but they're really just 30-pin RAM, but instead of like an edge connector, it has like actual pins. There are later 286 boards that use 30-pin RAM, but this one uses these little, I think they're called zip or ZIF RAM or something. Anyways, I have never, as far as how much this can take, on board it can take up to 4 megabytes. I've never seen a 286 board that will take more than 4 megabytes of RAM on board, but they may exist. I don't know. I'm sure you could add more with like a RAM add-on card. But as far as I know, on the motherboard, I've only seen them be able to accept as much as 4 megabytes, which for the time is enough RAM. So let us, I'll take a look at the cards now, and I'll let you see what I think makes good add-on cards for 286. Alright, so I'm going to start out with the two more mundane cards. The first one is the SCSI controller. So this is the controller I use for the hard drive. It's very simple. It's Adaptec. It's an AHA 1540 CP. It just has the 50-pin SCSI connector and the external connector. I'm only using it currently to control the hard drive, but you know, 16-bit ISA, there's really nothing super special about it. These are pretty cheap and common, so that's what I'm using for the SCSI controller. So then we'll move on to the other card, which is my main IO controller, and again, 16-bit ISA, nothing super special. This one is it's a Gold Star controller card. Focus probably won't. Anyways, I like the Gold Star cards. I've had a lot of luck with them. I put them in a system, they just kind of tend to work, and they're also pretty well documented, so you can go online and see what like the jumpers do. This is a Prime 2, and it has a port for your game, like your serial port, your printer port, and game controller, or game port or whatever. It has one IDE channel here for 2 IDE devices, and this also is my floppy controller. So yeah, that's what that is. I mean, it's nothing super special. It kind of has a lot of little transistors and stuff on it too, resistors, transistors, whatever. So it kind of looks the part too of being like an older card. I think this is an earlier controller card, but it works just fine. So now we're going to go into what probably most of you guys are interested in, and that would be the video and sound card that I'm using, because that's kind of the other than the CPU and RAM or whatever, that's kind of like the bread and butter of a gaming computer of any era. So I'm going to talk about the video card first. If you remember my 386 and my 46, I used a Sung or Sang Labs ET4000. ET4000, I used a 16-bit ISA version in the 386, and I used a VLB version in my 46. And you can actually still use that card in a 286, because it is a 16-bit ISA card, but I wanted to do something a little bit different and a little bit more versatile maybe. So what I chose for my 286 machine is this guy. And this is an ATI VGA Wonder. Now, these are pretty common. There was lots of different versions. This is the last version of it. This is the ATA Wonder XL24. So this came out in 1992. This was the last of the VGA Wonder series. This card's a little hard to find. It's a little bit sought after because it has a lot of bug fixes in it. It's the fastest one, and it's a 1 megabyte card. It's an overkill for a 286, but it's kind of the ultimate in that ATA VGA Wonder line. Last night I did a check on VGA Wonder cards on eBay, and they're all going for really stupid prices. I got this card maybe a year ago, and I didn't pay like $100. I forget what I paid exactly for it. It was a premium, but I think it was like $60 or $70. And at that time, I remember seeing a lot of other ones too that were a lot cheaper, $30 or $40 range. They're all like $100 now. Maybe, I just did a quick search. So maybe there still are cheap VGA Wonder cards out there, but I don't know why they seem to be going for it's eBay. But if you want the ultimate in the VGA Wonder cards, go for the XL24. But there are other ones like, I think it's called like the Plus. There's a lot of other ones that will work just fine. I just wanted to go all out. So why did I pick this card? Well, it has good compatibility. But one of the things I really liked about it was the ports. So we're going to go over these ports. First is most of these cards come with a mouse port. Now this may look like a PS2 port. It is not. This is what was called a bus mouse. And it's kind of like PS2, but this connection is different. So PS2 mouse will not work in this. You need a special bus mouse. I actually don't have any bus mice. There's nothing special about the bus mouse. It's just its own little connector. They don't work better. They're not more reliable, really. They're just, the only difference is it's a different connector. And I don't think they made any laser bus mice either. So I don't even use this port, but it's an option. Now what I really like about this card is this. And what you have is a standard VGA connector, analog VGA, and you also have the 9-pin TTL CGA connector, and this card auto detects. So what it does, it gives you more options. So if you just want to play VGA or EGA games, because VGA 100% compatible emulates EGA as far as I know, modern monitor, CRT, most LCDs, you can use a VGA connector. Now, if you, for some reason, you want to use a CGA monitor, you know, that old school feel, or there's some games that that work better, they display correctly on a CGA monitor, you have the option to connect it to a CGA monitor without adding another card or doing anything fancy. Now, the paperwork on this thing says it is 100% register compatible with CGA. I kind of doubt that. I'm pretty sure there's probably a couple games that won't run correctly on this. Couple, you know, CGA games that really need a true CGA card. But this will probably play most of them just fine, especially on a CGA monitor. And it's just another option. And I really like that it auto detects what kind of monitor you have plugged in. So this, in my opinion, is a really versatile card. Probably not quite as fast as, you know, an ET4000 chipset based card. But in my opinion, it's a little bit more versatile. You get a little bit more options with this card. And it's still a good, pretty powerful card. Lots of RAM, you know. Definitely, this card, it's definitely overkill for a 286, but you know, I wanted to go all out. So lastly, we're going to talk about a sound card. And sound card, you know, a lot of those CGA games, a lot of these early games that would run good on a 286 really are maybe PC speaker only. But again, you know, it gives you more options, and you can play some of those later games that do take advantage. Of course, a lot of EGA games take advantage of sound cards, so putting in a sound card is a pretty good thing to do on this thing. Now, on my 386, we put in a Sound Blaster Pro 2.0 or Sound Blaster Pro 2. Now, for this, I wanted to go a little bit different, and I went with this guy. And this is a Sound Blaster. This is a CT1350B, and this is a Sound Blaster 2.0. This is not a Pro. You see, this is an 8-bit card. These are a little harder to find, but this is what I went with. So I went with the Sound Blaster Pro 2.0. And see, you've got your things here. You got a little volume. You got your joystick port. Most of the connections that you find on a newer, later Sound Blaster. So why did I pick this card and not a Sound Blaster Pro or something like that? It's easier to find, and you know, all that jazz. Well, this is a little bit more era correct. This is an earlier card, so it's a little bit more, or it's 1991, but that's actually a later 286. But you know, this is an earlier card. But you know, it pretty much is the same, except there's one cool thing about this, and that is these chips. So the Sound Blaster 2, it sounds a little bit better than, say, the Sound Blaster 1.0. I think there might have been a 1.5, but so this is the best in the Sound Blaster line until we get to the Pro. So that's why I went with the 2.0 first of all. But second is these chips here. And what that is there was something that came out that Creative came out with earlier called Creative Music System, CMS. And there are a couple games that support CMS, and CMS is kind of its own thing. It's its own little sound standard. And now earlier, I believe the 1.0, you only need 2 chips, and they also came out with just the Sound Blaster. Or maybe it was a Music Blaster. I don't recall right off the top of my head. But anyways, it used the CMS. And when they came out with these Sound Blaster cards, they used chips that you could add that would give you pretty high compatibility, not 100%, but pretty high compatibility with games that use CMS, or Creative Music System. Now, for a long time, it was really hard to find these 3 chips. These 2 chips aren't anything special. You can get these really cheap. But this chip was called a PAL chip, and they were pretty hard to find. Thankfully, someone recently reverse engineered it, and now you can get these reverse engineered GAL chips, I believe, and you can add that, and then it will give you the CMS compatibility on a Sound Blaster 2.0. So that's kind of why I went with this. Now, keep in mind, there's some really good pages out there. There's a page called Nerdy Pleasures, which it's a clever name, but it has a whole page devoted on which Sound Blasters are compatible with the reverse engineered chips, because there are some revisions that are not. This revision, I think one of the giveaways is a number, it's not focusing. But anyways, I know the 1350B and this number down here 049151, I think. This was a compatible card. So this one does work with the reverse engineered chip. So keep that in mind. But yeah, that's my recommended sound card, the Sound Blaster 2.0. Okay, so I put it all back together. This is usually the part in my videos where you know, I go through some games and I just show off some gameplay footage on the machine. Usually I do that with direct capture. So I think for this video, I'm probably just going to point the camera at the screen. I'm feeling a little bit lazy, but also a lot of the games I'm going to show you here use PC speaker. And I don't know, going back and forth between pointing camera at the screen and direct capture footage might be a little jarring. So, you know, I'm just going to show off a few games on this. Maybe just pointing them at the screen. When I'm putting together another 286 video with a more standard sort of 16 megahertz 286. I'll do some direct capture with that when I do that video, eventually when I do it, but let's hope it works. I put it all back together. So now you may be okay. Yes. The turbo button works and it switches between 20 and 10 megahertz, but the LED's a little bit buggy. As in, I can hit the turbo button and it doesn't always change. There we go. So there's the turbo is on and it's at its, you know, 20. It's actually correct in this, at least in logical thinking, that turbo means that it's at its fastest speed, whereas like later systems, you hit the turbo button to slow it down. It doesn't make much sense. So yeah, the regular speed is 20 megahertz, and then if I deturbo it, it takes it down to 10 megahertz, which is still too fast for a lot of games that just want a 8088. So, and just to make my point earlier about this CPU being faster than a 386SX, just keep in mind that's the SX 386, and those are the early 386s. And those early 386 motherboards weren't exactly fast. Technology wasn't matured, where at this point where you have a later 286, the motherboard also has a lot to do with it, because, you know, it's a well-made, mature 286 era motherboard, where those early 386 motherboards maybe weren't so fast because they were still figuring it out. So let's look at some games on this. There, it's just booting up 4 megabytes of RAM. There's my SCSI card. Yeah, so you'll notice this machine, it does have expanded memory. It has an expanded memory manager. So, I mean, I don't want to get too technical with like expanded memory and EMS and XMS and stuff, but this later board, it does support some of that. It supports, you know, an extended memory manager. So that's nice. Some of the later boards do that. I don't have a mouse hooked up, but a serial mouse does work with the good old cute mouse drivers. So let's look at a couple games. So the first game we're going to take a look at really quick, this is Nex Turf. This game runs really well. It's in EGA mode. So that's the PC, really kind of annoying PC speaker in the background, which cuts out whenever you use the weapon. Yeah, this is not really the best version of this game. I'd really recommend playing this game on like a Tandy 1000. You get TGA graphics, which are debatably, I prefer them over the EGA for this game. Oh my. But the sound, the 3-channel sound on the Tandy 1000 is way better than the PC speaker on the regular PC version. And this game runs really good on this machine. Okay, so next I'm gonna play a helicopter game called Striker, which I'm not sure this game might play a little too fast. This is a CGA game that might play a little too fast. We'll see. Send key to continue. Yeah, I can already tell. I can already tell this game's probably going to play a little bit too fast on this 20 megahertz 286. So let's do intermediate. Let's play. Yeah, it's not insanely fast, but that's too fast. So let's see what happens when I hit that turbo button. So now I'm down to 10 megahertz. So let's see if it does any better at 10 megahertz 286, which is pretty slow for a 286. And it's still a little, it's better, but it's still faster than this game was intended to play. So that's what I mean about a lot of CGA games. It's just a 286, even a slower one, like at 10 megahertz, is just too fast. Now, the fast video card may have something to do with that. If I put in like a dog slow video card, that may help. But yeah, there's just some CGA games that just, even on a slow 286, just are too fast. Even with even with it deturboed. Okay, so here's Prince of Persia, and if you can hear, this does support ad-lib, so it's Sound Blaster. Well, it supports both, but this is going through the Sound Blaster 2.0, and it's running in VGA. And this game also runs well. I have it back up to 20 megahertz. This game runs fine in VGA at 20 megahertz on a 286. 286 actually plays a lot of VGA games just fine. I'm gonna hit here while I'm playing, kick it into 10 megahertz. Didn't really seem to have an effect. Here we go. Yeah, it seems to run just fine in either. Ugh, that's grisly. Alright, so I've got another one here for you. This is an EGA adventure game. So this is the kind of games I feel run really well on a 286. These adventure games, all the EGA games, and of course, focus, Leisure Suit Larry, of course. Alright, I just wanted to get past the copy protection, as humorous as it is with those questions. But yeah, this kind of game runs really well on a 286. Of course, it runs pretty well on a faster 80882 or a 386. So, but you know, the PC speaker has a lot to be desired. The better version of this game, again, I would say, is on a Tandy 1000, because you get that the TGA, which pretty much looks just like EGA, plus you get the 3-channel speaker sound, which is generally far superior to the PC speaker. Let's see. Bite Woman. Oh, that comes late. Oh, so I think maybe we'll take a look at one more game. I really wanted to pick out a game that was a little bit more challenging for this CPU, just to see what the 20 megahertz 286 can do. So maybe I can find a game that kind of fits that bill. Okay, so we're going to see if this 286 can handle Wolfenstein 3D. So the specs on this game, it wants a, I'm running MS-DOS 5.0, by the way, just to give it a little bit more of that old-timey feel and something different. You get sick of 6.22 after a while, but so the requirements on this machine meets them except for, the CPU. So we got VGA graphics, we got MS-DOS 5.0, we've got a Sound Blaster, we've got the RAM we need. It needs 640 kilobytes. But the only thing here is it wants a 386 at 33 megahertz. Sorry. Focus. I need a better camera. So we'll see. I don't know if this game needs 386 code. Or any sort of weird memory setup that we can only do on a 386, but we're gonna find out in a minute. Alright, so I have Wolfenstein 3D installed. No problem so far, but I'm actually going to start the program and we'll see if we get an error or it runs. Good sign, there we go. Oh, jeez. What the hell? Okay. It kind of flew through the menu there, but it seems to be working. So let's see how well it does on this 20 megahertz 286. Sound Blaster seems to be working okay. Sound. Ad-lib Sound Blaster, Sound Blaster, ad-lib Sound Blaster. Good, good, good. Start a new game. Let's just do episode 1. This is very acceptable, loading. Well, it looks a bit, well, that looks very off. It's running. Alright, so I think it might have been a little out of focus, but yeah, look at the, I think that's a compatibility issue, possibly with the ATI VGA Wonder, how it's like alternating, like there's like black, but everything else, it's just like the wall textures that are messed up. Everything else looks okay. The gameplay, it actually plays fine, really. Now you can tell it's not. You can tell it's not completely smooth. Like this would run better on a 386 or something, but it's certainly playable, except for the funky wall texture issue that's going on. So even at full screen, this is completely playable, except for that messed up wall texture. I don't know what's going on with that. Like I said, I'm guessing it's a problem with the video card. Interesting. So what do I think of the 286? Should you pick one up? That really, again, it depends. I would say not really. It's not really an essential item, for a retro gamer that's in the computer, especially if you have limited space. It doesn't do anything really special. It doesn't really do anything that you couldn't do on a 386, and the 386 could do better and have a wider range of games. And then again, for those really early CGA stuff, you're just better off with an 8088, because the 286 is going to be a little too slow. This machine in particular, I think is pretty neat. I think the 20 and 25 megahertz Harris 286s are pretty capable, and they're pretty cool. And I might do another video in the future kind of experimenting and pushing them a little bit more, try different video cards, stuff like that. Personally, I think this machine's kind of cool, but for your average retro gamer, I can see why enthusiasts aren't really into 286s too much. They just don't do anything that a 386 really can't do. And they're harder to find. So, I mean, I'd give it a pass unless you can find one really cheap and you don't have a retro machine, they're fun to tool with, but not really a necessity. So thank you for watching. Hi, and thanks for watching my videos. If you enjoyed them, please feel free to subscribe or check out my other videos in my Anatomy of series by clicking on the links. Thank you all again for watching.